Hello, you Forge faithful. Anthony Urcioli with you. It's the Forge Audio Network. It's the match day preview. By the way, this is the official home of your reigning, defending, undisputed Canadian Premier League champions, winners of 3 of the last 4 straight finals appearances, Forge FC. A huge one, a monumental clash this weekend on Sunday at York Lions Stadium in North York, Ontario, the 9:05 Derby. Forge FC and York United going head-to-head, 7:30 York kickoff time on Sunday, July 9th. And why is this so monumental? Well, just take a quick peek at the standings. By the way, Forge and York both at 14 matches on the season. We are exactly at the midway point of the CPL schedule. So now it's time to start bearing down a little bit here. The time where we can say, it's too early to look at the standings. I'm looking at the standings after week 1. That's just the way I do it. But for some of you, we can't use that anymore. We're in it now. We're in the thick of it. We're in the midway point. Forge FC in third place of the table with 19 points. York in second place with 20 points. Forge, 1 point back of York United. And with this expanded playoff format this season, with 5 teams getting in, finishing first and second is huge. Finish first, you get you get a trophy, right, for the best record of the regular season. But maybe even bigger than that, if you finish in the top 2, your path, let's say, to the CPL final a little more advantageous with this kind of page playoff format that we have. So second spot's huge, and Forge 1 point out of it, a point back of York, which means, end of the day, Forge is still in control of their playoff seeding, even looking at the fact that Pacific in first place, they also have 2 matches in hand on both York and Forge, and they're at 25 points. Not insurmountable, but certainly an uphill battle. So focusing on the task at hand, and that is York United well within striking distance and an opportunity to take matters into your own hands and leapfrog them without any help from anybody else. Breaking it down a little bit, home record for York, not very strong. 6th best in 6 home matches this season. They have just 7 points, -2 goal differential, just 2 wins in 6 matches at home this season. And that leaves the door open for Forge FC, 3rd best away record in terms of total points. They have 10 in 7 matches, 3 wins, a draw, and 3 losses. So an opportunity to be had here, perhaps. Head-to-head, Forge FC, 11 wins, 7 losses, and 1 draw against York. These 2 clubs have met twice this season already. They will meet 2 more times, including this match on Sunday. And in those 2 matches, the away team came away with 3 points. First, it was Forge winning at York 1-0, and then it was York breaking the hearts of Forge fans with that last-second winner to put York out front 2-1, and that's how that ended at Tim Hortons Field. So split down the middle so far. We don't have to get too deep into the last match for Forge FC. A lot of things went wrong, despite some good moments, just not enough good moments. And we're back to kind of the same thing, right? They gave up the first goal again, a recipe for disaster. And it was in this one. They had to play catch up all game. It just took them out of their rhythm, out of their flow. It doesn't matter who you are, what your mental state is. When you're playing from behind consistently, it does something to you. You expend more energy. You start, when you have players playing with a lot of pride, you start wanting to do things. You want to be a difference maker. Unfortunately, this team is at their best when they're working as a cohesive team. And it's easier to do that when the score is either level or you're playing with a lead. When you're playing from behind, it does something. There's some urgency there. It just builds up a little more anxiety. And you're just not the same team. You're just not. It doesn't matter who you are. And Forge is not immune to that. 7 straight matches now, Forge FC have given up the first goal. That is not good. And that's going to put you behind the 8 ball. And it has up to this point. And it's been a reason for some of the inconsistencies in the results for Forge FC. Now, that'll come up again in the 3 keys. I can guarantee you that, because it has almost every week. And until something changes, it won't go away. But just kind of painting a picture here. If I look at the top 10 players in this league, under the stat category of big chances created, 2 Forge players are in there. Tristan Borges, tied for second. Kyle Becker, tied for third in that stat category of players creating big chances. Now let's even zoom out a little bit here. Big chances per team. Forge FC and York United tied for second with 26. Pacific has 29. They're in the lead. So these are 2 clubs that create a lot, but York does not have individual players in that top 10 category like Forge does. And you have Borges and you have Becker there. This team is creating. Forge is creating. They're creating plenty of big opportunities, big chances. Now, some of it has just been the fact that they just haven't been good enough in the final third. The finish, that clinical finish just has not been there. And it has to be. You have to bury these chances. Because as we've seen, when you let these chances pass you by, you leave yourself open defensively on the counter, and that has burned Forge consistently over the last month plus. Now, some bad luck involved in that as well. Forge FC, they lead the league in hitting the woodwork, hitting the post, 7. That's 2 more than Pacific, Calvary, Atletico, Valor. Bad luck. I mean, when you look at that, you want to say it's bad luck, because we know that when you're talking about hitting the woodwork, we're talking about a matter of just inches, and it hasn't gone Forge's way. Now, I found this interesting. We talked about big chances created. What about big chances missed? Forge is second with 17. Not a big surprise based on what we've seen. York, number 1 in big chances missed with 22. That's 5 more than Forge FC. So Forge is not the only club in this match. In fact, we may be looking at the 2 definitive clubs when it comes to just not capitalizing on your opportunities, just creating but not being able to finish. Some bad luck. Although Forge, I mentioned the 7 posts, York have hit 2. So they haven't been as unlucky in terms of just that game of inches. But something has to give here between these 2 clubs. You would think shots per match. Forge FC lead the league with 14. Shots on target. Forge are in second with 4.5. So they're getting shots, they're hitting the target, and most of all, they are leading the league in possession, something that we are very used to. No different this season, 56.6%. Here's what's wild. Ball possession. Forge FC, the number 1 ball possessing team in the league at 56.6%. Pacific, who's just, really just running away in terms of those kind of offensive stat categories, not just in the standings, but their goals scored, their goal differential. Pacific's been just a unit this season. Ball possession per match, 49.7%. Now, you look at that, and it could be because they are leading so much that they're willing to give up possession in those moments in lieu of defending, basically. So that's where that kind of lines up for me. But York is just at 50.5%. So this is right. We've been, and by the way, that's not accurate crosses. I threw this in there because this one stood out. Accurate crosses. Forge lead the league. So their deliveries are there. They're creating. Their crosses are getting in and connecting with teammates. Just that finish has not been there. And you don't need to single out any individual players because it really hasn't been one player individual. It's just on the attack. Forge, they've just not been able to put away their chances. So with that, we're going to bring our guest in because Benedict Rhodes has been keeping an eye on York United, and yeah, we need some answers because we're looking at the stats. We want a little more in-depth analysis here on our opponents this weekend. So with that, CanPL.ca analyst Benedict Rhodes joins the matchday preview. All right, Benedict, thanks again for joining, a regular on the program. And I got to tell you, I'm looking at these two teams, and in terms of teams that like to create a lot of chances but have had trouble finishing, I think these might be the top two teams in the league in that regard. So, I mean, just from a York perspective, has that kind of been the story this season, that it's a team that's able to generate, but maybe not quite able to capitalize on a lot of those opportunities?
Yeah, definitely. Their two main strikers, Asaze Di Rosario and Brian Wright, have combined for 2 goals this season. Both of them from Di Rosario. One of them was just this past weekend on a pretty big deflection as well. So they're getting good opportunities. I think Di Rosario has one of the highest expected goals in the league among individual players, but they're just not putting the ball in the back of the net at the moment. Like you said, similar to how Forge are playing at the moment.
Yeah, and it looks at, you look at the table and it looks like Pacific. I mean, there's still, still half of a season to go. Pacific, though, separating themselves a little bit. And teams like Forge, York, bit of a dogfight for again, both teams with an opportunity to still finish first, of course. But it looks like these are the clubs that are kind of battling for that second spot right now.
Yeah, for sure. Some people call it like a 6 point game, if you will. Like if one team pulls away by 3 points, the other team doesn't. And both these teams have games in played more games than Pacific as well. So it's a big opportunity for both these teams to not only make a statement that we can still win this, but also playing against each other, a rivalry game as well. It's setting up a pretty exciting matchup, I think, at York Lions Stadium.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've really mostly just seen York play when they're playing Forge, and you don't always get a good, let's say, a look at clubs when they're playing Forge, because teams sometimes play a little differently against Forge, where they'll give up some possession and try to win on the counter. But York, though, just on a game by game basis, what kind of tactics are we looking at from this club?
Yeah, it's a team that likes to play in wide areas. They have some very talented players wide, but also in central midfield. This game will be, I think, won or lost in the middle of the field with there's kind of the three, I guess, are Mobabuli, former Forge player, of course. He's coming back from suspension for this game, and Jeremy Gagnon Lapare and Brem Sumaro are proving to be a pretty good duo in the middle of the park as well. And Osama Alou, who recently scored again at Vancouver, and all those players are capable of playing very well defensively, but also making things happen and transitioning well and getting the ball off the pitch quickly, which can potentially catch a team like Forge off guard on a counterattack.
Yeah, the counterattack has been something that has worked against Forge maybe a little more this season than it has last season. I think teams are still approaching. Last year, a lot of teams tried to beat Forge on this counter style of tactic, and it didn't seem to work as much last season. Why has it just been maybe burning Forge a little more this year than in years past?
I think maybe the last few weeks in particular, Forge are maybe looking for a goal. They're maybe putting a few extra bodies forward to try and get bodies in the box and find a goal. And when they do that, they leave their defense exposed a little bit. And I think the game when they were away at Vancouver a couple of weeks ago, for example, there were 2 goals scored in span about 5 minutes of each other, where both of them were on those quick counterattacks up the field, where maybe one misfortunate slip or one key moment or one pass that just slips by a defender or something, and the team's gone. So I think that's something that York can try to exploit as well, and something that Forge needs to maybe clean up a little bit.
York has not had a lot of success at home this season. I admittedly have not been to a game at York Lions Stadium yet. I know Forge fans are well traveled in that regard, heading over just to the GTA. But I mean, I don't. Sometimes it's tough to figure out why teams are just better on the road than they are away from home. What is it like at York Lions Stadium for a York match? We got to see what Halifax is like, which is always hostile grounds for any team visiting. Does York? I get the feeling they're not quite at that level yet. But what is kind of the environment? What is the reception for this club? What can fans expect when they attend a match at York Lions Stadium?
Yeah, I don't think anyone in the league really compares to the fans in Halifax. But
Right.
York Lions Stadium, they have some passionate fans. There's the section right behind the goal of the most vocal fans. I guess they have the smoke going, they have the flags going, and that can be intimidating for any road team, I think. But also, you mentioned Forge fans travel well. I'm assuming they'll be there in large numbers as they were last time, and I think that'll make for an exciting sort of off the field matchup as well between the two sides.
So, I mean, there's nothing we can really point to in terms of just why York have maybe struggled a little more at home this season.
I don't think there's anything in particular to that. I think maybe just away from home, playing a bit more pressure, maybe playing from home and maybe getting up for those games a little bit more. And I think if they can start applying those same sort of mentality to playing at home as well, I think that'll probably serve them well.
Watching that, watching Canada and that match against Cuba and seeing two CPL players on the field at the same time, it just, I think, when this league was created, we almost got spoiled a little bit because things happened quicker than we thought. Big transfers early on, and we saw Forge's success at the CONCACAF level, and things kind of started moving quickly. And maybe we took for granted the fact that some of these things maybe happened quicker than even we had planned for. So when you see two CPL players on the field for Canada, I mean, what is that kind of it's a nice message to send, I guess, that these players belong.
Yeah, for sure. A couple days after Canada Day as well, we were celebrating, the players in this league. I believe there's been over 75,000 minutes, I think, for Canadian under 21 players so far in this league. I believe that number's correct. So to see two of them, two players who played the university level in Canada, two players who played at Calvary, and then Dom Zator, of course, going to York and then moving overseas, both of them. So it's kind of it's proof that pathway works and proof of what the Canadian Premier League is all about, really, which is developing players for the national team. And Luturi, especially, he's a young player and he could play for this national team for another 10 years if he's good enough and available. So, I think that's just proof of the concept, I guess, of the Canadian Premier League starting in the first place.
It always surprises me a little bit, and it's almost you wonder if there's maybe just a stigma to the fact that seeing a lot of times when you're selecting squads, you look at the pedigree, you look at where they came from, and sometimes some players just get excluded based on their resume, where they play. It's a little surprising to me that more keepers haven't gotten a look at the national level from the CPL. That one surprises me a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think we had Marco Carducci get called up in the first ever season. He was the first, I think, Canadian that called up to the national team from the CPL. But I agree. You think, especially when you're playing in a tournament like this, where it's about developing players, I do think even just as your third goalie, bring up Marco Carducci or someone from this league and give them that opportunity, and they'll have that trickle down effect as well, where they'll go back and players in the league will say, like, look, this guy got called up. Why can't I get called up? And also, I think center backs as well. There's a lot of good center backs in this league, and I'm quite surprised not to see someone like Namer Didic at Pacific, for example, get called up to the national team.
Yeah, and obviously Tristan Henry's a name that stands out in my mind as well. The numbers he's put up in the resume, but it is what it is. But I think seeing these players get opportunities, it does open the door just a crack more each time. So it's some good signs for the league and for the country and for the sport in this country. Benedict Rhodes, thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again. All right, that brings us to our three keys to the match for Forge FC on the road, taking on their geographical rivals, York United. Key number one for Forge FC. I don't know how many different ways I can word this, but I'm not going to stop putting this in until something changes. Key number one: break the streak. This might be a record for a key showing up in consecutive weeks, but this has to be broken. Forge has conceded first in 7 straight matches. It has to come to an end immediately. Doesn't matter who you are. Playing from behind is an absolute killer, especially in this sport. It sucks up energy. It almost just dismantles your game plan. It hurts your tactics. It affects you. And it is, again, we can talk about, it doesn't matter who the team is. You cannot keep playing and keep using this recipe. And of course it's not intentional, but there has to be some urgency and a commitment to getting the first goal. It just, yeah. I mean, it creates more angst among players. I mentioned it earlier, but it bears repeating. This team is just, it's such a, when things are going right, the fluidity in the attack, it is a well-oiled machine. I mean, it looks like it's being played by AI. It's that just beautiful and fluid. maybe AI is not a great example, but you know what I mean. I mean, just machinery, like almost like it's been pre-programmed. Everything looks so smooth. But it's hard to play that way when you're playing from behind, because naturally as a player, you want to make a difference. You want to start doing things. You start doing a little too much. You start bearing down a little too much. You know, you're taking an extra look at the goal rather than just relying on your instincts because you're trying to make it perfect. And it takes its toll playing from behind. And so that needs to end with this match at York United. Key number 2 for Forge FC. Sheet cleaning. Listen, always a good idea to clean your sheets. Maybe once a week. Maybe I'll even give you once every 2 weeks. Even. That's the furthest I'll go. But in Forge's case, the last time Forge has pulled off a clean sheet, shut out their opponent, May 23rd. It was a 1-0 win against Atletico Ottawa. Since, they've averaged nearly 2 goals against per match. This team needs to commit to disciplined, patient defense. Patient, the key word. They've been way too aggressive in some of their defending, and it's left them susceptible. Too much 1v1 defending. The team, this team, by the way, it takes a lot of pride in their defending. We know this club is the offensive juggernaut it's been, but they take a lot of pride in their defending, and they are not happy with their results and the amount of goals they've been giving up. But you have to defend as a team. This 1v1 defending is not going to work. They're putting themselves in situations where players are being kind of left on an island. It has to be a team effort. The team has to be dedicated to this. Patient defending. Patient being the key word. You don't have to be too aggressive. You don't need to take risks and win possession back immediately. Be mindful, right, of what's gone wrong in the last several matches, the way they've been beat on the counter. We're going to get that in a sec. But it's patient, it's discipline, it's relying on your teammates to bail you out. You don't have to be overly aggressive when you're defending 1v1. Let's get back to these clean sheets that this team, everyone likes the feeling of clean sheets. And Forge, they do, and they've done it consistently. We know Tristan Henry's track record, but it has to be a team effort. Key number 3 for Forge FC. Counter the counter. I mentioned it. League leading, 56.6 possession, percent of possession per match. That leads the league. Most of the goals conceded by this club, they're not because that teams are building an attack and breaking them down, bit by bit. Teams are relying on quick strikes on this club and counters. Game planning to beat Forge on the counter, it's nothing new. We've been seeing it for a number of years now. However, it's been working a little too much recently over the last month or two. York in particular, by the way, very dangerous on the counter. They like to attack wide. This team needs to be aware of the counter, and it cannot be just one player getting back and defending these long balls on the counters either. It needs to be a team effort, like I said in the earlier key. And if York in particular, not only do they like beating on the counter, they like doing it wide. What does that mean? It's going to be on Forge's fullbacks, wingers, holding midfielder, whoever. It needs to be more than one player dedicated to coming back and helping out and preventing these goals on the counter. If you eliminated some of these goals on the counter Forge have given up, go back and watch the tape and how many of the times they've been beaten on the counter. Take those away, and Forge is just they're swimming in W's. It's 3 points consistently. That has been a killer for them. They have to be aware, and they have to counter the counter. All right, we've said it all. There's nothing left that can be possibly said. All that's left is for this club to go into York Lions Stadium and try to secure those 3 points. Keep your eyes open, your ears open. 3 keys will be dropping on our social channels. I know you just probably heard them, but you can get a little bit of a different version, right? On Instagram, specifically Twitter, Facebook, all those things. And if you're not subscribed, do so wherever you get your podcasts, because there's Forge content delivered basically daily. courtesy of myself and Mackenzie. And don't forget, after Sunday's match, I will go live, instant reaction after the final whistle. And you can catch that on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Twitter was acting up for us, as it was for everybody over the weekend. So if you want to be safe, maybe use YouTube, but whatever you prefer. Okay, with that, we will talk to you very soon. Enjoy the match.